What's good, YouTube? Cardfight King here, Aqua Life Baby. You already know how it is. So today's going to be the second deck profile from the Moonlit Dragon Fang set, or whatever, the Butterfly the Moonlit set 9. Today's going to be my Silver Thorn deck. Honestly, I really like the Silver Thorn deck. It's I like it aesthetically. It's a very fun deck to play. It is definitely more consistent. I'll say it's more consistent and hairy in the fact that, getting your soul set up, getting certain pieces to your hand, setting up your rides and things like that. It's definitely more consistent in that regard. But the deck still does have its issues as far as, some of the same problems it faces, before this set released. And even counterblast denial, not really having too much. Sometimes your push plays just really aren't enough numbers wise, things like that. But you do get off a lot of attacks. You definitely have to think when you're playing this deck, low committal from hand, spam the board. Sometimes you have to live with not having boosters from Venus, and that's just something that you as a player have to work on, especially with how decks are scaling into late game, like Rose and MLB and whatnot, and eventually Luquier in a few weeks. Definitely, you're going to have to, definitely play this deck a lot differently. And so I kind of built it to handle some of those late game scaling type decks. And even some early game, power plays that, can happen too. But the deck, again, doesn't draw nearly as much as it did before Dorian got hit. And, they do have some ways here, but they also have a few hidden costs built into the deck to achieve certain things. But we're going to go ahead and just go through it. I did get the SP pack, so I'm pretty happy about that. But let's go ahead and get to the deck profile. It's definitely not a top tier deck, probably not the strongest, definitely not among the top 3 strongest to come out of this set personally, but it's a solid deck, very fun to play, and you can definitely take quite a few games with it. So let's go. We got Arena SP pack. I pulled the SP pack, so I'm happy. 4 copies of Venus. So Venus is half of Luquier and half of Dorian built into one card. If you have a full front row, all circles are filled, your front row gets 5k. And when her other skill is to counterblast 1 and discard a card to call out as many Silver Thorns as you can from your soul to the front row. And then at the end of the turn, as if you suck in 4 cards, then you get to gain an Excel marker. So this deck kind of forces you to play Excel 2 solely for the fact that you want to be able to go into Excel 2 at the end of your turn with Venus and draw a card. So you want to keep building up your hand. That seems to be the theme of where this format is building up your hand as much as possible. A lot of the Protect decks don't have like the cheesy guard manipulation type skills and whatnot. So now it's more like, Dragon has power columns. You have MLB who hits for astronomical numbers because they generate 2 force markers per turn. We're going to have Luquier. So going Excel 2 just makes the most sense in this deck, being able to continue to draw cards so you can defend yourself on the upcoming turn. But it's just counterblast 1, which is cheap. And one of the things you have to live with this deck is just swinging with your front row, which is why cards like the regular Luquier are so important. And we still play a copy of Dorian. Regular Luquier is the best beer in deck. Now, I don't want to ride her unless it's a situation where I am going to kind of going in the game, because she gets out a full board, and you can say, yeah, that she does get out a full board, and the boosters make your regular circles a lot stronger. You can argue that point, but that counterblast 2 definitely kind of hurts, and I really don't like going into her a lot. outside of her going in the rear guard. So she's our best, essentially our best rear guard in terms of power and attacking. With Dorian still works. It's just that you have to think about when do you need to use Dorian. Dorian is good if you ride her first, and if you if you ride her and then use her ability, and then if you use her ability when you have at least 2 Excel circles, because you want to be able to suck in 6 cards, draw 3 cards, add a grade 3 to your hand. It's kind of like a mid-game like power draw play. Then that means that it'll set up your next ride. You'll ride into another grade 3. You'll have a 3rd Excel marker. Then you can spit everything out with Venus and kind of go in and really start pushing after you drew in a bunch of cards. And again, this deck definitely wants low committal from hand. And you just to set up your soul, get low committal from hand, and then try to keep making Excel markers and keep pushing. That's essentially the gist of what the deck kind of wants to do. So we're going to go into the grade 2 line. The grade 2s really haven't had too big of a change. 4 copies of Lillian, 4 copies of the Dragon. Still just the 2 best beaters in the deck. Lillian is just such a good card, especially if your opponent is damage denying you with like a Force 2 deck, and you're going to see that a lot more when we get the promo for Ultimile and Chronojet or Gear Chronicles, whatnot. You'll see a lot more of those decks popping up again, and Force 2 can definitely, stall this deck out if they catch you at, using your last counterblasted card. So there are times where you don't want to use the skill, just leave everything on board, and at least Venus will give everything 5k going into the next turn, and you'll still have a very wide board. So, Lillian is still going to remain your best attacker, as Dragon does lose his value in that regard. 3 copies of Sylvia. So Sylvia's a new card we got. She's like the Harpy, basically. So what she does is when you call her to the Vanguard or rear guard, you counterblast 1, and you call 2 Silver Thorns from your soul. So this is what I meant by a hidden cost. Your Venus gives you an entire front row. If you call her out to the board, then she can counterblast 1 and give you 2 cards that you can put into your back row. Now, that's essentially, that's literally like, okay, I'm going to have a better Venus turn, but, I paid the cost of regular Luquier just to have a slightly stronger Venus turn. Sometimes it's worth it depending on where you're at with it. Other times it's kind of like, eh. Now, I did have her at 2, but I bumped her up to 3 because it's a card you definitely want to probably see early game too. Like, especially if you ride her on top of Irina and you have a nice soul, she does allow you to open up with a decent turn too. Because again, with this deck does, is not as strong as a lot of the other decks, especially from this set. And this deck, now it has access to really a decent turn 2 push, and you want to keep pushing your opponent's damage. This deck is all about, spitting out a board and getting it, trying to go face and get as much damage as you can on your opponent and overwhelm them with, with a lot of attacks. So this card can definitely help you out in the early game window. If you set things up in the fashion. And then I play 3 copies of Shada. She'll probably get replaced when we get when we eventually get the grade 1 card Moo, the promo card. But I'm playing Shada because she's just another kind of like a pseudo 15k block. When you play her in the Guardian Circle, you throw her in the Soul, and if you have 4 different named Silver Thorns, your Vanguard gets plus 15 for the battle. So she just acts as another 15k shield in the deck. Again, it's just to help combat, and it did save me quite a few times against MLB. Just like, okay, cool, she's actually 15 and not just a 5k. So throwing her into Soul for 15, helps you survive things. So a lot of what it is that, again, we're doing low committal from hand, but we have certain cards here to help us survive a lot of the nastier turn 2s that you're going to be seeing, especially in this format. And turn 3s and so on, so forth, late game scaling, all that. So for the next grade 1, we have, so we got 4 copies of Irina, 4 copies of Romy, and 2 copies of Linnea. So obviously you guys know about Irina and Romy. Romy being like one of the most important cards. Just toss her in a soul. Look at top 3. Soul charges many silver thorns. Now we have plenty more silver thorns to throw in soul, so it's still very consistent. Linnea is a different card. So when she attacks or boosts, she gains 5k, and you mandatory soul charge 1. This can make for some really nice beefy columns, and if you put her into the soul, if you don't really have anything else that you can call out, you can call her out, and she'll still be she'll swing 13, she'll swing 13, and she'll be 8, she can be an 18k card, or she could be a 23k card if you call her to the Excel circle, which if you have to, that's probably her preferred spot. So she could be 23, and then you can have like another card be 24, or if you want her to stay at 18, whatever it is. She's just a solid card. She's a solid card overall. It's a better addition to the deck than Breathing Dragon. Breathing Dragon kind of lost his place. He doesn't really do too much. I never really use him again. With the deck so strapped for Counterblast, and you having to shift your focus to being able to survive these scaling decks, then she just makes a lot more sense. And then last but not least is grade 0s. 4 draw PGs. You need them this format. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. 4 heals, and we are playing 8 front triggers. So I was playing 4 and 4 front, 4 crit. I went down to, and then I went to 2 crit, 6 front, but I went back to 8 front because again, you're spitting out a front row board, and when you hit a singular trigger that's not a draw or a heal trigger, the crit trigger is nice, but it doesn't do too much. And a lot of the times, you're not even putting your triggers into the soul. If you check, if you reveal them, or if you look at them with Irina or Romy, you're sending them to the bottom of your deck, and then hoping to get a shuffle so you can have them circulating again. But really, you just want front triggers. This is the main trigger you want to hit. You're already swinging wide, and this deck just pops out a soul, goes wide. And this is the best trigger for decks that really just want to really go wide. Kind of like Yasui, in this deck. So the front triggers just work out a lot better. Testing the crit triggers, when I would hit them, it didn't really affect the game state a lot of the times. And hitting a front trigger, had a lot better results in terms of me pushing damage and trying to get them to 6. But that's the deck profile, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed it. There are a few things I do want to try, kind of test out in this deck. Maybe go back to try out that the swordsman for some for some counter charging here and there, but otherwise this deck is really just about being able to manage your damage, control certain aspects of the game, and seeing how hard you can push. It's a good deck. It can be pretty consistent, but you guys know where it stands. You guys know where it stands in comparison to everything else, really. So, this has been Deck Profile again. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We got another deck coming up. I think we're going to go ahead and get Yasui now. So, this has been Cardfight King, Aqua Life Baby, and we're out.